We waste no time with our next guest. He's had one of the biggest influences on my broadcasting career. He's the play-by-play voice of my favorite team, the New York Yankees, on the Yes Network, the afternoon drive host of the Michael K. Show on ESPN 98.7 in New York City, and a future New York Times best-selling author. He is Michael K. He's got a new book out called CenterStage, My Most Fascinating Interviews from A-Rod to Jay-Z, and he joins us right now on our progressive guest line. Michael, appreciate the time as always. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Did you hear something from the Times? This is news to me.
I'm telling you, I'm calling my shot. I'm like Joe Namath predicting the Super Bowl. Your book,
Wow.
Michael, will be a New York Times bestseller, which I know is a big goal of yours, right?
That would be fun. I mean, if you're going to write a book, you might as well try to, go for the stars. That would definitely be it.
So we're going to get to the book. But before we get to the book, I just want to say this about you, because when I was furloughed last year at the very beginning of the pandemic, I want everyone to know what type of guy Michael K. is. He was one of the first people to reach out, send me a message. So you hear about a lot of people in our business being jerks and bad guys, but I can tell you firsthand, Michael is one of the nicest people I've ever interacted with. He's always been great to me. So please definitely support his new book. And now, as far as the book, Michael, the book's called CenterStage. To our national audience, obviously people in New York know the show CenterStage. Tell people what this book's all about, your inspiration for wanting to write this book in the first place.
Well, when the Yes Network started, that was 20 years ago, they needed shoulder programming, which is programming that's not Yankee games. And one of the things they came up with was Inside the Actors Studio for Sports, and that became CenterStage. So 20 years later, we're still on the air. We've done about 240 shows, and the book selects the 35 best or most intriguing interviews that we've done. And the inspiration for it, Jake, ironically enough, was a couple of years ago. I had vocal cord surgery, and I literally could not speak for 6 weeks. So, fighting depression, watching other people do my job on Yes, I read a lot. And one of the books I read was Howard Stern Comes Again, which was like little snippets taken out of a lot of his interviews that he's done over the years on the radio. And I started to brainstorm in my head. I go, well, that could be something where we'd run whole transcripts of interviews of what we've done on CenterStage. And I pitched it, and a publisher liked it. And it's not just the transcripts of the interviews. I think what makes the book interesting is that we have the backstories. What people act like off the air, how we got them, how they got to the studio, how do they treat people, things like that, and where they were in their lives at the time of the interview. And you could read the interview like the A-Rod interview was done in 2003. So if you read through that interview when he was at the Texas Rangers, do you see or do you sense any foreshadowing of what was going to happen in his life? So, so far people have really liked it, and they find it enjoyable, and some of the stories intriguing.
What was the hardest part about putting these interviews together? Because obviously there's 35 interviews, I believe, in the book, but there's been way more episodes to CenterStage. So how hard was it, Michael, to try and narrow down the best interviews you wanted to use?
It was really, really difficult. And, I sat down with the editor and the publisher, and I came up with a list of 50 of the 240, and just, you don't realize, how many words fit on a page until you sit down and go, well, if we put 50 in, this would be a 600-page book, and that certainly doesn't sell. So we kind of winnowed it down to 35. I fought for some, I lost some of the fights, and the 35, these are the ones we all came into agreement on.
Who was your favorite guest out of all of them?
It would probably be Larry David. I was a fan of his. Obviously, I love Seinfeld, and was a big fan of Curb Your Enthusiasm. And when we were able to book him, I was both excited and terrified, because he's so smart. And when you interview somebody who's so smart and so sharp and so quick on his feet, that's a challenge. You have to be sharp and quick on your feet as well. And I didn't know if he was going to be the Larry David from Curb, who's, kind of a jerk and rude at times. And he's not that guy, but he is that guy, if that makes sense. He even addresses it in the interview. He said, yeah, I am that guy. He said, but I can't say the things I say like that in real life. I'd get beaten up. He said, so I actually think like that, but I don't actually have it manifest in real life, because it just wouldn't work. I wouldn't survive.
Michael K. with us here, Yankees play-by-play announcer on the Yes Network, host of the Michael K. Show on ESPN New York, and his new book, CenterStage, My Most Fascinating Interviews from A-Rod to Jay-Z, is available now. You mentioned Larry David. I know you're a huge Seinfeld fan. You just said it. You talk about Seinfeld a lot on your radio show. Could you ever get Jerry Seinfeld on, or is the fact that he's a Met fan going to be tough to maybe get him on a Yes Network show?
You know what? I think that has to be it because we've tried for 20 years. And, we either have not gotten traction or somewhat resistance. And, he and Larry David are extraordinarily close. And Larry has had a good experience on the show. And we've since become friends since the show. And like, he'll text me during Yankee games. Why did they do that? Why did he take that picture out? Stuff like that. So I'm sure that if Jerry would ask Larry would say, yeah, it's a good experience. But maybe if Gerrit Cole was the host, he would do it. But he's definitely loyal to the Mets for sure.
Michael, you mentioned Howard Stern. You and Howard Stern, to me personally, are two of my favorite people that I love actually doing interviews. Howard, it speaks for itself what he's done. But CenterStage growing up, I'd watch the show constantly, and I've taken bits and pieces, and I've always tried to apply it when I'm working in sports media. What do you think makes a really good interviewer?
That's a good question, Jake. I think you've got to be prepared. And the thing that I do in interviews, I'm not saying that everybody should do it, and it's a pet peeve of mine when I see people on interview shows. The interviewer should never ask a question that's longer than the answer, because you have to remember the person you're interviewing is the star, and especially on CenterStage, they're literally, celebrities. And I've seen it in some guys that are really, really very, very successful in this business. They drone on and on and on with the question because they want everybody to know how prepared they are and how smart they are and how much they know. That's not what I think a good interview is. I think a good interview, get in, get out, let them expound on the question, because I've always found the longer the question, the shorter the answer. And, if you're not letting that person, actually open up, then you're not doing a good job. So that would be my best advice to any young person learning to interview, is just get in and get out. Don't make the question so long.
When was the last time you had an interview for CenterStage that was just a train wreck that went really wrong?
Dennis Quaid. Of the 240 we've done, I'd say that is far and away the worst interview that we've ever done. He was promoting the movie The Rookie, which was about Jim Morris, the teacher that was in his late 30s that was throwing, and his student said, you should try out. And he did, and he made the big league. So it was a great premise, and Dennis Quaid was a big star. But for some reason, he got to the studio, and he claimed he did not know that it was an hour interview. He thought it was almost like a Kelly Ripa, Ryan Seacrest sort of interview, where, 8 minutes you're in and out. But that's not the case. It's a long commitment, which makes the guests we've had even more impressive. But that being said, he sits down and he's not ready to play at all. And the first two segments of the show, it's an 8-segment show, every answer is yes or no, which is death, just the worst. And after the second segment, we go to commercial, and I lean over and I said, the show's an hour. Whether you say yes or no or not, it's not going to make the show go any faster. And I got thousands of questions. So if you keep this up, you're going to look bad, not me. So you can choose to proceed as you want. And he was kind of startled that somebody would talk to him like that. And he got a little bit better as the show went on, because he realized it was an hour no matter what. But it falls under the heading of train wreck.
Michael K. with us here, the new book, CenterStage, my most fascinating interviews from A-Rod to Jay-Z. Larry David's in the book, Seth Meyers, Mike Tyson, Serena Williams, A-Rod, Quentin Tarantino, the list goes on and on. Here's a question I have for you, though, Michael, because as I mentioned, I'm from New York. I've grown up watching CenterStage on the Yes Network. You always would ask this question to every guest. The question is, if you were trapped in a foxhole and you can only have one person in there with you to help you get out, who are you taking with? I want to ask that question to you now. Who would you take to help you get out of your foxhole?
Definitely my wife. She's the smart one in the relationship, and she'd find a way to get out. But if you eliminate a family member, I got to tell you, it's funny. I might take a guy like David Cole, who I work with on the Yes Network, because he's so smart, and something clicks in with him in big moments of stress that he's able to handle it unbelievably. He'd get us out, and he'd get us out alive. But definitely it would be my wife first, and if you eliminate a family member, it would be David Cole.
I love it. So you're in your 30th year calling the Yankees on either radio or TV. Do you ever have to just pinch yourself that a kid that grew up in the South Bronx who wanted to be the announcer for the Yankees gets to live out that dream every day?
I pinch myself every day. I never step into that booth and don't like just take a moment to realize, wow, this has really been happening for 30 years. 30 years, it's gone by in an eye blink. It really has. I know that sounds like a cliche, but it's really gone by fast, which means I've had some fun. The Yankees have always been good. They're always competitive. They're always striving for a championship. There's never ever been, a time where they just bag 4 years to make themselves better. That's not what the organization's about. So I always tell my friends from college, you ever hear me complain about my job, just punch me right in the face, because that means I've lost grip on reality. So now, I pinch myself every day.
Michael, explain to our audience how difficult it is to do an afternoon talk show where you have to give your opinion, and then you're also working for a team. So if the Yankees are bad, you can't say they're playing great. You got to be honest with your listeners on radio. How difficult is kind of towing that line of being a team employee and, of course, still having to be honest with your listeners on the radio?
Well, it's a tightrope for sure, because not so much with the team, the organization, but the show is simulcast on the Yes Network, the radio show, and it's on in the clubhouse. So you're ripping players, especially if they're not doing well, and they're hearing it, and that's uncomfortable. The thing that makes it doable, Jake, is that the Yankees are really cool about things. And that goes back to George Steinbrenner. He realized that if you're going to tell the truth when things are going badly, then people will believe you when things are going great. Because if you try to put lipstick on a pig and then you try to, talk something up when it's going well, people are going to say, well, he was saying it was going well when they were losing like 8 out of 10 games. So I think people know that I'm going to tell them the truth. And also, it's a completely different job, radio and TV. So, people have always said, "Well, you're a different person on the show than you are on the games." Yeah, it's a different job. I'm supposed to give opinions on the show, and although I could sprinkle opinions in during the play-by-play, the opinions belong to the analysis, and so that's David and Paul O'Neill. They're the ones that are going to give opinions, and I'm just like the point guard on the play-by-play. So I'm just setting them up. So it's not like I'm afraid to give my opinions on the game, but that's really not my job.
Michael Kay with us here. Finally, Michael, let's talk about the Yankees. Last couple games, they've looked good. They've obviously won 2 straight. It looks like, maybe, dare I say, they're starting to turn the corner. What's your take on what's happened the last couple games against Toronto? And do you still think this Yankees team, when they're right, is a playoff caliber team that can contend for a title?
They're a playoff caliber team, but only if they hit home runs. And I think that the rough start they've had to the season is a manifestation of how they're kind of constructed in a weird and funky way in 2021. Jake, if they don't hit home runs, they don't have the ability to create runs. They don't run well. They don't play little ball. They never have. They don't move runners. They don't steal bases because they just don't have that capability. They're not a good defensive team. What they do, and they do as well as anybody, is hit home runs. And with pitchers being as good as they've been for 2 months, the home runs weren't there. And if the home runs aren't there, they're not going to win. The last 2 games you mentioned, home runs. That's why they won. They had 3. The first game yesterday, a pinch hit, 2-run home run by Gary Sanchez. That's how they're going to win games. And I guess what the Yankees can hang their hat on is with Major League Baseball outlawing sticky stuff, maybe pitchers are going to take a quantum step down, and that will allow the Yankees to return to the home run hitting team that they were built to be. But the flip side of that is how will it affect their pitching? Because, everybody was probably using something. And Gerrit Cole gave the Yankees reason to hope, because obviously not dealing with anything yesterday, although he's never admitted to doing it. And his spin rate dropped 200 RPMs, which is a huge drop. And he still was dominant last night, 8 innings, 2 runs. So I think Gerrit Cole is such a great pitcher that he's going to be great no matter what the rules are. But we'll see how the other pitchers do.
He's Michael Kay. You can follow him on Twitter at @RealMichaelK. Of course, he's the longtime play-by-play announcer for the Yankees on the Yes Network, the host of the Michael Kay Show on ESPN New York 98.7 with Don LaGreca and Peter Rosenberg, and a future New York Times best-selling author of the new book, CenterStage, My Most Fascinating Interviews from A-Rod to Jay-Z, which is available now. Michael, good luck with the book. As always, you've been great to me. Thanks so much for always coming on, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Jake, and I've never wanted you to be more right about that New York Times thing.